Okay, we are back. I'm very happy to have on the Goldstein on Gelt Show, Jane Bennett Clark, who you very likely know if you've read articles in Kiplinger's about retirement, because that's where she shows up. She's got a bi-monthly column there, and sometimes she looks at a lot of the questions that we talk about here on the show a little bit differently. So, Jane, tell me something. When people are planning for retirement, and I talk a lot about planning, it seems that they don't necessarily know what's going to be in the future. And then they say, if I don't know, how can I plan? What do you tell people in that situation?
Well, you really have to actively plan what you're going to do in retirement. You can't just show up on day one of your retirement with nothing in mind. So some people advise practicing retirement before you actually leave the workforce. So, for instance, if you think you might want to move to Florida, it's a good idea to take a trip to Florida in the summertime, check out the heat before you've picked up your stuff and moved down there. Or if you think you're going to take a bunch of road trips, take a couple before you actually get to that point. So it's really actively thinking about retirement and making a plan that seems feasible, trying it out a little bit. That's just for what you're actually going to do. Then the second part is figuring out how you're going to pay for it. So that's a whole nother thing.
All right, let's get to that in a minute, because the money, of course, is the topic that I'm always interested in.
Right.
It is a finance show, but one thing I tell people is people focus so much on money in terms of, they think it's just how much more money can I have? How much will my portfolio grow? And I tend to think that's a mistake when people look at it that way. How do you feel about it?
Well, it is important to have some basis in reality for what you're planning. But I do think that it is true that you have to think about how you're going to spend your time. Retirement could last 25 or 30 years, and it's almost a little scary to not know how you're going to spend it, not have some sort of thoughts about how you're going to spend your day. And so you do have to think about that well in advance of your retirement.
And how does that relate to spouses who might have spent the past 30 or 40 or 50 years not spending all day together, and then all of a sudden they're thrust together because they both retired?
Right. It can be tough. Actually, I just wrote a column about that because people do end up in retirement, sometimes not even realizing they have very different ideas. So maybe one spouse wants to move to a warmer climate and the other spouse wants to be near the grandkids. And that can really cause problems later if you haven't discussed that ahead of time and, maybe come up with a compromise.
Yeah, I think that's true. One of the things I find funny, my day job is that I'm a financial advisor. So I talk to people all the time about these issues. And I'll give you just sort of a funny story. I once had a couple that came in. I was going to be presenting the financial plan, which is like this big meeting where we follow up on all of our discussions. It's the summary of where they're going. And the husband made a point to arrive a few minutes early. And he said to me, "Doug, I've been thinking that, I love my wife and I think it would be great. And I bet she'd really love a new car. So can you build that into the plan?" So I said, listen, I'm going to be presenting the plan in 5 minutes. You can't come and tell me new information like this. So, but next time, we'll talk about it. So I sort of, because what was I going to do at that moment?
Yeah.
So then we're sitting in the meeting, and just out of the blue, the wife says, I'm thinking, I don't really need a car anymore. I don't like driving that much, and I prefer to take the bus. And you can see this guy had no concept of communication with his wife.
Yeah. Right.
So just being with a third party, I think in this case helps. Have you sense
you're
about
both
that?
more marriage counselor than financial counselor sometimes. But it's true that people have to talk to each other. And I think sometimes it's just hard to talk because or you don't think about it. You don't think, oh, I should run this by the person who is most involved. Or you're kind of worried about what you want versus what he or she wants. So, it is a bit of it's an important part of retirement planning to check with your spouse as to what their plan is.
Yeah. Hi, honey. Guess what? we're talking with Jane Bennett Clark from Kiplinger. She writes a fantastic column, a regular column about retirement. And so we've been talking a little bit about the softer side of retirement, not the money. But Jane, let's get to the money, because I think that's what people want to talk about. One of the main issues that a lot of people have, or the fact is most Americans, I think the vast majority of Americans, use Social Security as the main source of income during their retirement. And yet there are so many different strategies for taking it. what would you think is the best way for someone to make that decision when to start taking Social Security?
Well, it really depends on your circumstances. There's no right answer to that. But the things that you need to consider are, first of all, your life expectancy, your health, and also your finances. So obviously, if you've been laid off from your job and you're like 62 and you're just eligible for Social Security and you're struggling to make ends meet, I don't think it's a hard decision to decide to take Social Security. However, if you have a really long life expectancy based on your family history and but maybe you're not so sure that your savings is going to last for another 30 or so years, then it probably would be a good idea to delay Social Security because you get an 8% boost in your benefit after full retirement age until 70. So you could really beef up your guaranteed income by waiting. But again, it really depends. Or look at it the other way. If you have a short life expectancy, maybe you have a chronic disease or family history where people die in their early or mid 60s, then you want to take that money because, realistically, you might not live long enough to really get what you deserve.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think the U.S. government, the Social Security Administration, because of course they know literally the date that each of us is going to die.
Oh yeah,
on average. So the calculation that they're making is in theory that everyone should get the same amount of money. If you start later, you get a higher monthly amount, but for fewer years. And if you start earlier, you get less every month, but for more years. So one of the things I tell people who I see are really struggling with this issue is don't struggle too much, because if you just feel average and do the average thing, it doesn't really make a difference, which isn't to say there aren't strategies behind it, but I don't think you can go, there's no point in going crazy because you'll just never know what the right answer is till.
Right. Well, one thing is that people do get a little crazy about the whole, I don't want to leave money on the table and I don't want to die before I get every dollar that's owed me. But, when you look at it, okay, well, you are going to be dead, so you're not really going to care. So, it's just really, the Social Security Administration doesn't know you, and it doesn't know your circumstances, and you're the only one who does. And so it's a decision that you have to make knowing what your circumstances are.
Let's talk about another way that people make money in retirement, which is working. When someone retires, do you think he has to completely stop working?
Absolutely not. In fact, the whole word retirement is a misnomer these days because so many people do work into, past their career job. And so I've tried to frame it often when I'm writing. I try to say, when you're working past your career job or when you've retired from your career job, because so many people do work in other jobs after they leave their career job. And so retirement is kind of a funny word these days, but I think, I don't know the statistics for people who continue to work in some capacity, but many people do, and I think it's a good idea.
Do you think that it's reasonable to plan on that, or you just see that as a bonus?
I do think it's not a bad idea to plan on it if that's what you want to do, or, there's a number of reasons why you might want to work in past your career job, and one of it is that maybe you want a job with less stress, but you still want to be constructive or have organize your day, or maybe you need the money. So there's a lot of reasons why you might want to do that, but I don't see any reason why you shouldn't plan for that. Seems like a good idea.
Yeah, my only concern with that, I saw some study, and I'm sorry I don't have it in front of me, but it was a study about, they asked people, when do you plan to retire? And people said, no, I love my job. I'm going to keep working, forever. And then it turned out that pretty much on average, they all ended up retiring at standard retirement ages for one reason or another, mostly health or just being too tired. So I'm nervous when people tell me that part of their actual income plan for retirement is to continue working. I think it's a great bonus. It's a great, there are all sorts of emotional benefits. And also, why should you stop giving to society, which is really what work is all about? The problem is when people do need more money and interest rates being so low, what do you think they should be doing in order just to make sure they'll actually have enough monthly income in terms of their investments?
Well, that's the question for the ageds. But again, I think that you really have to just decide what kind of guaranteed income you're going to have in retirement. You have to make a budget and figure out what your expenses are going to be. and how you're going to pay for that. And if there's a gap, then you have to have the savings to finance that gap. And if you don't have the savings, then you might have to work longer if you can. If you can't work longer, which does happen to people, then you're going to have to change the plan accordingly. So, there's a lot of different ways to approach retirement and making your income last in retirement. I don't think there is one way. Again, it depends on your circumstances.
Yeah, I think it's difficult, but I think one thing that people have to realize, especially today when interest rates are so low, is that you should not try to find some investment that's going to pay you what you feel you deserve or what you want. If rates are 0 or 1 or 2% and you find something that's paying 10%, there's real risk there. And then you have to ask yourself the question, right. Well, maybe it's nice to make the 10%, but what if it went down 50%? How would that affect me? So don't reach for the stars. You've got to really keep your feet on the ground when you're doing retirement planning.
Right. Well, the other thing is too, though, and we stress this a lot, is that you do have to assume some risk in retirement. You do have to keep some of your investments in stocks because you just have to get some growth. And especially today when there's just nothing going on the other side, you do have to continue to invest and have a portfolio that includes stocks even into your late retirement.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to look at in that on that topic, but unfortunately, Jane, we are out of time. We've been talking to Jane Bennett Clark from Kiplinger's. In the last few seconds, can you just tell us how people can follow you and follow your work?
Right. Well, first, it's very important to go to kiplinger.com and view all of the great content that we have on our website. And you might consider getting a subscription to the magazine also. So you'll have to go online to see how you can do that. But definitely go to www.kiplinger.com and check it out. We have some great material on that website.
Okay, super. We will put a link to that at the show notes of today's show at goldsteinongelt.com. Jane Bennett Clark, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.